Super progressive. What is good, everyone? Welcome back to another artist interview. And Ruben and I are just so stoked because this week it just seems like the guests get more legendary and more legendary because, this week joining us is Luke Brancaccio. Is that correct pronunciation?
You said it well. I've heard it a lot worse.
How are you doing, bro?
I'm good. Sunny here in Hackney in London. And I'm having a rare lazy day, which is nice.
Nice. There you go, bro.
Very nice. Very cool.
Well, it's not very lazy times for you, though. You got a lot going on. I kind of we're going to get into your career and everything, but I want to start off with some exciting current news because your track Reflections with Gai Barone and Hans Beeger is blowing up right now. It's been really cool to see. It's one of my favorite tracks to listen to. You see Hans on the synth, like doing the whole thing, and
like he's like an old school operator, like a phone operator.
Yeah, but every time that you see Hans' Instagram feed, he's always like playing with this huge wall of sound that is just amazing. He's like a really
incredible
kind of guy.
It's really, really incredible to be able to work with him. And that was Celador kind of gave us a bit of a wish list for the 10th anniversary release and asked us who he wanted to work with and gave us a big list of names. And he's somebody I've hung out with. Jimmy Van Em actually was staying with me, and we hung out with. He introduced me to Hans when he was playing over here. So ever since then, we've been kind of talking about working together, and to be able to work. I mean, he is like a crazy scientist. It's with hair and the wild look, and it's just like his equipment. It's absolutely.
No, he really is like a technical genius in that sense. Yeah, totally.
Absolutely. And the way he mixes a track. I mean, Guy and I are good, but he is amazing.
I want to ask you a little bit about how does you guys probably have all different styles of producing tracks, and I imagine that a lot of this collaboration potentially happened remotely. Can you talk a little bit about how the process was, like how you go about collaborating with this time 2 different artists on one track?
It was Guy and I work remotely all the time, and he's the only person I've been able to work with remotely. And we are so similar that it's just like synergy. It just works. It just, but working with a lot of people just hasn't worked in the past. And with this particular project at first, because Guy and I have been doing, with Kiki have been doing the Tokyo Fan Club stuff. We sent Hans at first something quite slow. I think it was like 120 BPMs or even less than that maybe. And he was like, at first, what am I going to do with this? And instantly I thought it was going to be very difficult to work together. And then but we said for him to come up with like the bass and the drums and send it to us. And then as soon as we kind of put the top bits on top and sent it back, it worked so easily. I think in the amount of days we managed, if you count the actual days we worked, it's probably, or the hours, it's probably no more than 2 or 3 days, like or less than that. I mean, it was a really, really quick, it was over about a week and a half, but I think the amount of hours put into it, probably, about a day and a half of actual hours, maybe a bit more. But it was.
But that's the kind of cool thing that happens when you're with creative people, right? Like in a really creative sense. Even though that everybody's like at different parts of the world, it's very nice.
And especially when there's no egos involved. It's like you can go, that bitch, I'm not into that bit, don't like it. And just because the other person has made it, if all 3 are not into it, there must be a reason that all 3 are not into it. If all 3 are into it, that's a good sign. So it's just learning to kind of just not be precious. And, I mean, we're old as fuck anyway. So it's just like, we're over being, artists with massive egos. I mean, we all probably do have massive egos, but we keep them in check when we work with each other.
Oh, totally. I got to hear the track being, what do they call it? Road tested. I went to the Celador 10th birthday event at Studio 338. Yeah. And when I think it was Dave and Steve on the decks and they dropped it, and I was getting content from the top, like the overlooking perch. Yes, dude. And it was massive. It was so cool to see the sea of clubbers, everybody into it. Dave and Steve going crazy, but I guess it was a massively successful road test.
I saw the club for the first time in that video, and it looks fantastic. And that was just the bottom layer. There's like the other layer on top as well.
Oh, it was so cool. And you know, one thing you can't really see in the video, but I appreciated from just like the clubber's perspective is the floor of that club. And I know like for sound, sometimes you want wooden floor, but the floor of that club is like that gym floor material that gives a little bit. So it lets you like just be on the dance floor comfortable for longer. And it's those little things that make that club really, really cool. The glass ceiling, it was awesome.
Does
Sounds like an amazing experience.
What's up?
Does it open up in the summer?
I don't think they open it up, but when they go late, it lets the sun come in and give this like whole vibe. But I'm not sure on if it can actually like retract like a football stadium or not, but that would be badass. But yeah, man, like, and so that was kind of, you know, that's right around when that trip I messaged you and I was like, dude, we got to do an interview. The track's crazy. And we've been talking a lot. So let's get into it, man. Like,
absolutely.
I guess we kind of start these interviews with like a current event like we just did. And then we'll go back to the beginning. And I'm really curious for someone who's had such a long career in this industry, you know, can you kind of give us some stories about how you first got into first like electronic music, but then more so how you decided, okay, I kind of want to make a contribution to this.
Yeah. Well, my mother worked for Chris Blackwell who owned Island Records.
Oh, nice.
And she was his PA. So she was bringing vinyl from an early age. And it was like, you know, hanging out with Bob Marley and David Bowie.
That's like a direct contact with music history, man. It's like
on our road. I lived in Notting Hill Gate, and on our road, Pink Floyd lived at one end of the road, and at the other end of the road, the band Foreigner, were in the house at the other end of the. And then my mum was really very rock and roll. So music started from year dot. I mean, it was. You know, she was pregnant with me when she was working at Island. So
it's cool. Wow. Way back in the early days of the page, before I started working for DT, I had asked him to contribute a record label that he thought, like, it wasn't necessarily his favorite record label, but a record label that was extremely important to the history of music. And he gave Island Records. Yeah, so it was really cool. But that's cool. So
Island Records is like everything, man. Like Zeppelin, everybody. It's amazing.
I mean, so I started off listening to like lots of different kind of music, and then getting into the house music was weird because I was really into hip hop when I was a kid. Never really that into dance music. A little bit when like it wasn't drum and bass. It was like hardcore started coming out. Like Mr. Cook, Your Son Is Dead, and like, you know, all the very early start of it. And then, but I ended up living in a house with, there's a saw outside.
Okay.
Don't worry.
I ended up living, I flirted with, my timelines get confused as well. So I was like, flirting with the idea of DJing when I was really young, and someone gave me a mixer and I had like decks and stuff. So I played a lot of kind of the early hardcore stuff, like, and then I was like I used to about like 15, 16, just blag my way into clubs and just say the most ridiculous stories to get. And I ended up And I would always be able to flag my way in. I don't think I ever paid to get into a club. And then I lived in a house with 5 other DJs for a while who were into dance music, but they were into kind of more soulful house. But every so often they were played. I remember hearing like Not Forgotten by Left Field and Gat to Core Passion. I was like, that's my kind of sound. If I was going to get into it, that's my kind of sound. And then I started getting obsessed, and everyone had decks in the house, and I was practicing, just couldn't get it for. I must have taken longer than anybody to learn how to mix. So it must have been close to 8 months of trying and not being able to get it, and just like, this is so confusing. And then one day it just was like, that's how you do it. And then it was like a revelation. And then what happened was I moved to I borrowed some money from my parents, and I, without telling them, I went to and moved, and I took a flight to LA, and I ended up not knowing anybody, getting off at LAX airport and crying in the toilet, going, what have I done? And I stayed in a motel. It was just after the Rodney King riots, and I stayed in a hotel, I think about 93, 92, stayed in a hotel on Hollywood and Western, in a motel, with really dingy, horrible place. And I used to walked up and down Melrose, kind of walking into record shops, pretending I was a resident at Ministry of Sound. And the last record shop I went into called Street Sounds, I think, on Melrose. And Jean-Philippe Abiance from Alcatraz was working there, and he just took pity on me, and we became best friends from that day. I ended up moving in with him and living with him out there, and then warming up for him. My first gigs were warming up for him as British DJ. They didn't even have my name. And I was awful as well. It was like really bad. But Jean-Philippe really trained me and really took me under his wing. It was if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. He really, really looked after me. Just out of luck, I bumped into one of the best house producers ever. You know?
Why'd you choose Los Angeles?
Because when I was a kid, I was just fascinated with movies, and LA is just where they made them. And I kind of thought, I just want to be a part of it. When I left school, I worked briefly as an assistant director to this pop video, and that's kind of what I thought I wanted to do. So it was like, I just thought, I'm going to,
Yeah, but it's then again, like the whole background of island music and island records music in your house and everything, and like the whole scene happening in LA, and like you have to be in contact with the whole scene, right?
Yeah, it was just, I would do, as a kid, if I got something in my head, I would just go and do it, no matter what the consequences were. And 9 times out of 10, you'd land on your ass. But every so often, it would really pay off, because I used to just walk into, I got invited to a studio once, and then I just hang out from there on in every day. And I'd just be that weird kid. Guerrilla Records was around the corner from my house. And I used to just turn up and just ask for records, and they'd just be like, "Who are you?" And then in the end, it became a running joke, and then they just took me under their wing, and I just would hang out with them. But I was at first just this really kind of no clue kid that had no social awareness and of people feeling awkward, and I just ended up kind of forcing myself on them.
So it seems like you were in the UK. And you're down the street from Guerrilla Records. This whole progressive thing is really starting to happen with the tracks you mentioned, Passion, Gat Decor. Was it weird can you kind of just explain the differences in the early scenes from being in the UK, where this progressive stuff is kind of exploding, to then, I'm curious about what the scene was like in LA in the early 90s when you started DJing.
Right. It was in England, so I was very young, and my memory is not great for obvious reasons of that time. So, but in London, it was just it was quite even though it was very hedonistic, and it was taken quite seriously. It was like Gorilla was run really well. Like, it was like proper full-on massive office with tons of people working in there, all hustling and stuff. And the scene here, like I used to go to the drum club, see Darren Emerson, and like, he'd be like an idol of mine, or like go to the gallery and see Tall Paul, who was like massive. Like that was a little bit later on, to be fair. Originally it was like the drum club with, just Charlie May and all of these people. And it blew my mind. The first time I ever walked into the club and just heard this, loud, amazing, sexy music, I just felt like, I definitely, this is where I belong. This is kind of,
I need to be a part of this.
I desperately, like there was no other choice I could make other than I had to be a part of it somehow. I was a shit DJ at that point, and I couldn't make music. I tried to, but it was just awful. But I had persistence and time on my hands.
So how did you get into that technical side of okay, I became a DJ, then I'm warming up and I'm doing this thing in LA. And did you start producing in LA, or you came back to the UK?
No, I didn't start producing in LA. I came back, and then I can't remember the year. Must be mid 2000s or something, or early 2000s. No, late 9. I'd have to look at my discography. Definitely early 2000s. I think Lovely Day came out in 2000 or something. So it was. But I was DJing in a club, and Faithless used to come to this club all the time, Rollo and Sister Bliss. And basically, the engineer Gert Spotsenhard was there, and they thought it was a good idea that we'd go into the studio with a guy called Bruce Asher, who's Brancaccio Nation, Bruce Asher, and this guy Gert Spotsenhard. And then we started working together there. And then I was kind of like the ideas man at first. And then Bruce was kind of more technical, and Gertz would be the mixer. And then just after being in, like, we worked Bruce and I ended up working almost every day for 6 years, 7 years together. So, and then you just learn on the fly, basically. So it was, after a while, Bruce would just be like, I'm not doing everything. You've got to learn. Stick me in front and just like baptism by fire, basically. So it was, and then I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed programming drums. I love programming drums. I love coming up with core ideas. What I'm a bit lazy in is like, this is why I've done loads of tunes on my own, but I really prefer working with other people, because just the fiddly bits at the end and neating it all up is just like,
Yeah.
I've done the fun bit. I just, yeah. So it's, but with working with Bruce, it was, just him and I every single day, 7 days a week, almost for 6 or 7 years, just learning. We used to go to kind of the Hooge nights and listen to Tilt and Slacker and just stand in the middle of the room and just kind of no drugs, no alcohol. We just go stand in the middle of the room and go, right, we're going to create something like that when we get back to the studio. And we learned like that. And then a year later, we were playing and hanging out, and the Slacker and Mike and Mick are really good friends now. They were like, they had no idea that we used to kind of like, nerd over them. Do you know what I mean? And like, be like, not stalkers, but we'd just literally stand sober in the middle of the room, work out. We looked like nerds. Like Bedrock. First time I ever tried to get into Bedrock with Bruce, they wouldn't let us in because we looked so nerdy.
Like with like a notepad, like ready to run.
We had like CDs in our hands and like everything. And then like the second time we went, which was amazing, I kind of, because I just, I've got no social awareness. I just walked straight up to John, gave him the CD, and he played it that night. And that was
really? Shit.
Yeah, he played it. The first tune we ever made, Bruce and I together, Darker, on our own. And we, like, first time we couldn't get into Bedrock, and then we went the next, I think it was every other week or something. And then we went the next time, got in, and then within 40 minutes, he was playing it.
Dude.
And then, yeah, so it was just, and then what I just keep doing that for a while, and like just go in and kind of give CDs, and then he'd just play them. And then we ended up.
So that's how you ended up getting into Bedrock.
Getting into Bedrock. I never really spoke to Digweed. That his assistant Sharon, I would give the CDs to her. So it was really funny because I had been signed to Bedrock for about 4 years or something, and I'd never spoken to John because every time you'd be in a club, I'd be DJing at Bedrock, but I just never spoke to him. It was just a weird, and every time you'd be in a club, there'd just be so many people like around him. And I just didn't want to be one of those people kind of like, so I just kept my distance. First time I ever spoke to him was in a toilet queue at Space in Miami. And I was like, hi John. He was like, oh, and I was like, I'm Luke Brancaccio. He was like, no way. I'm like, I've seen you tons. How come you never said hello? I didn't realize. And that's when I gave him a lovely day in the toilet queue.
It sounds like to me like curious for how quickly technology progresses in the era when you started producing. Was it analog or digital for you learning in the early 2000s, or were you kind of straddling both?
No, at first it was analog. It's like some people like kind of like samplers that you'd have to kind of sit there for hours trying to get it in time. Like you'd literally be like hours and hours with this massive knob to kind of, just spending days and days on something that now takes seconds to do. But then as soon as digital came out, we embraced it quite quickly.
Nice.
Like we had a huge studio that as soon as digital came out, we actually thought, we don't need all this analog. We were really stupid and kind of got rid of all our analog stuff. And
really? Like all the synths?
Oh God.
Man.
And it was we thought that was it. You don't need analog anymore. And we kept a few little bits and pieces, but the majority of it we kind of got rid of and streamlined. But and now I'm buying it all back slowly. It's
nice.
Like the original price.
And so I just want to get this straight because I'm not going to pretend I know everything sitting here. But what was you're explaining that? What was the name of your first like production duo?
Well, the first, we had something called Blag, which was, we only did 2 records. They were really cheesy. And that was with the guy from Gertz from Faithless. And he wanted to go down that thing, but that kind of style. But Bruce and I just were really not into it. So we parted amicably. And then Bruce and I was Brancaccio. We did actually our first ever production on Bedrock. I think it's Bedrock number 6 or even 4 or something. Was called White Room on the label, and it's called Strapped. I think it's called. I'm really useless with names of the tracks I've made. But, it's called Strapped, and then that was the first. We gave that to Sharon from Bedrock, gave it to John, and he signed it instantly. Like I think we got a phone call back the same day that we gave it to. So yeah, the first productions were Brancaccio, like that of any relevance was Brancaccio and Asia. So then we did White Room, and we did a couple of other things. Like we tried to harder style under the name Divider, which were great stuff, but we really didn't need to be changing up. Like
but Suicide Sports was very cool, also. Yeah,
Suicide Sports Club. Yeah, that came a bit. Yeah. That came a bit later. That exploded really quickly. We're on the front cover of every magazine. We're on the front cover of DJ, and that really kind of threw us in. Lovely Day kind of threw us into the big leagues. Like we went from, playing in dingy clubs to like after Lovely Day being able to choose any festivals, Creamfields in Buenos Aires, and like Warung and Brazil, and we but then when Suicide Sports Club came out, which was more of a band thing, John really, because it was on Bedrock, which was a new label made for us, for John, and he kind of I went from singing in front of nobody to the festival, and it was like I think the first gig, rather like people like start singing off in pubs and small things. Our first gig was in Fabric. You know, it was
nice.
It was. I crapped myself. It was the most scariest thing that I've ever done. I hated being the front man of it. It was horrible. Hence why it didn't continue for very long. Also, I was going completely off the rails with alcohol and drugs back then, at that period. I think mostly to contain the nerves, because before that, I wasn't actually that bad, you know. So it was just...
Okay.
It was...
Yep. The thing is that the Suicide Sports Club had it was like an in-between sound, because it really sounded like mainstream, kind of pop, kind of grungy thing, but at the same time, kind of underground. Tracks like The Last Ghost in Town, which I love, have that kind of sound. It's pretty cool.
Well, that really divided a lot of people. Like, it kind of, you know, like you'd have magazines going, it doesn't make any sense as a whole thing. And then you'd have people going, the amazing thing is every tune is different and, you know, unique. And we had Saffron from Republica singing on it. We'd have, you know, one of the singers that was with Massive Attack. I can't remember her name. Sarah.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, we had all these amazing people on the album. But it was the first time we could sit down and do non-dance music after like all these years of doing dance music. And then some of it was dance music, but it was just that kind of in between. And I think it was a little bit before its time as well. But I mean, we did really work really, really well. It was just...
Yeah, but you could see the trend going in production wise, and you guys with tracks like Looks Like a Star that sound kind of similar to The Last Ghost in Town. They're in the same kind of vibe. It's kind of like that electro, kind of progressive house groovy thing. It's pretty cool sound.
Oh, thank you. I mean, but the good thing is now, like, because it was like learning how to actually write songs as well, like with some structure rather than, you know, a build up with a breakdown. You know, it's like verse, chorus kind of things. So now we've got Tokyo Fan Club, which we're back album on Bedrock for John again. He's like, oh my God, not again, you guys, because we've said this times. It's like, I can't believe I'm doing this all over again. We're a lot more sensible now. But, and we've been doing a slow release over the year. I mean, the things that are happening with Tokyo Fan Club are incredible. I don't know if I should say. We've got the remixes. The remixes coming out are by like the big, like the remix. We're getting every tune on the album remixed by someone huge, and it's going to blow people's minds.
That is very cool. I mean, that is amazing.
The producers are my heroes. Like,
let's go.
Like 90% of them are like, oh my God, I can't believe, you know.
Can you kind of share with us how Tokyo Fan Club came to be?
Yeah, it was right. Because we were using Kiki, who's my wife actually now. We were using Kiki on a lot of our tunes with Gai and I. And on several of them, she actually wrote the lyrics. And we were always just putting, it couldn't be Luke Brancaccio, Gai Barone and Kiki Cave. So we were always doing like featuring Kiki Cave. And then Guy and I both found it slightly unfair that we were using her almost on everything and it was always featuring, which is always a little bit secondary. So we just thought we'd start Take Your Fan Club up and do kind of like a bandy style. Kiki wanted to do a lot slower stuff. We wanted to do kind of, you know, so we just met in the middle. And it was weird because when I found out, I think I was going out with Kiki for about a year and a half, and I didn't realize how well she could sing. And then she kind of was just in another room belting out something, and I was like, holy shit, you know, she's amazing. It's like, well, I could have been doing this ages ago, like using her ages ago, and kind of, you know, so it's, yeah, I mean, for me, Tokyo Fan Club is one of the most funnest things, and we're back now making more music as Tokyo Fan Club, and it's a little bit more edgier than the actual album, because the album was more home listening too, like for home listening, and you know, with a few kind of party vibes in there, but like you can easily listen to at home and it not do your heading like big club stuff. But we've actually adapted that sound and come up with something really good. We're like, just today I've been emailing with like 3 of my all-time labels that I've always wanted to be on, that are all like talking to us about signing the next stuff to them, you know. So it's amazing. Fan Club is like, there's stuff with like Netflix and Apple TV is going to happen. I mean, the whole thing is going to be huge. It's just, John purposely said, let's just drip feed it over a year and kind of, you know, build up the album slowly and the band slowly, so you're not just shoving it into everybody's, because, you know, there was a budget, and it's and rather than blow it all in just the first bit just to get you out there, it's just, let's just take time and think about it carefully, that what we want to.
I think
where did the name come from?
That's what I was gonna. Well, I was gonna ask that too, honestly.
So I love coming up with names of stuff, and I like stuff that doesn't mean anything. Like Suicide Sports Club, I was in Japan. I was playing in Japan, and then we were up in the mountains, and this guy, he couldn't say snowboarding, and he like weirdly went, "You want to go Suicide Sports Clubbing?" And I was like, down the hill. And I was like, I'm nicking that.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I think Tokyo Fan Club came up from my love of Tokyo, trying to make something a little bit as quirky as Suicide Sports Club. And it was just like, yeah, Tokyo Fan Club. You know, it's not that far from Suicide Sports Club.
Well, it's cool because you're I was just at Stereo in Montreal, and the photographer of the event, it's so recognizable. The Tokyo, like he had the black sweatshirt with the green on it, nice. And it's like, and it's on site. And I just think that's really cool. From I just say, job well done. And one other thing,
that's a very cool name.
It's such a cool name. And the other thing is, like, I think your approach about dripping this out over, you know, a couple of years, to me, it makes in an era where there's thousands of songs produced every week in the same genres, it's always it makes it feel always relevant, rather than put it out, burn out, and within 2 weeks it's on to the next thing.
And it was to be honest, it was John's idea, because I was quite up for, we've got to get it out there. We've spent a year doing it, a year and a half doing it. Even longer, like it was like a year and 7 months doing that album from beginning. Because the actual way it came about, like we made Monsters. Kiki and I made Monsters really drunk in a kitchen. We were in the kitchen. We didn't have a full, like I didn't have all my gear up, and we just had like tiny keyboard. We had a really bad microphone, and like a piece of like coat hanger with a stocking around it as a pop shield. I mean, it was really basic. And we did Monsters in the kitchen there, sent it off to Gai. He kind of like made it all fancy. And then we sent it to John, and John was doing Quattro 2, I think, or Quattro 1, I can't remember. Maybe the first Quattro. And then he said, I want this for the Quattro album, and I want you guys to do an album. So he's been, John has always championed everything I've done from, like, just over the years. When I went off the rails a bit, he said, look, I'm here for you, but you have to sort yourself out. You know, once you sort yourself out, come back and I'll be there for you. And he always has done. We've got very similar taste in music.
Yeah, but because what you're saying is that I was talking to Will these days is that you as a musical entity, like your sound has always been a staple of Bedrock Records. It's like a kind of a Bedrock sound is the Brancaccio sound. It's always been there.
Yeah, it's I think I've released more records than anybody else. I'm pretty sure I've released more records than anybody else on Bedrock. So if you count out like tunes on albums and singles and remixes I've done for them, yeah. I think, I mean, it was Bedrock was the first kind of religiously like club I'd go to that I wanted to desperately be a part of. Like I'm not, afraid to admit that I was just like overwhelmed by it, and so it kind of nurtured me, and then I've kind of in return come up with my style for it, which other people have taken on as well, and it's it's been a nice circle,
full circle thing. Very cool.
I have a question for you on the label front, because like so much work with Bedrock, I'm way more familiar with Celador now. Do you approach production with when you're making music for different labels? Is there kind of like a different process that, say, you're doing a Bedrock thing versus another thing, or is it all kind of the same and the label comes after the fact on who it would fit with?
I tend to make music first, and then think who it'd be good for, and then I'm relentless at sending music. I mean, we've been signed to every label: Crosstown, Lost and Found, Renaissance, Bedrock, Side Beat, Mobley. Every big record, because I won't give up. And also, I can be very patient. Like I'll send, like lots of people send a tune and then wait a week and then don't get a reply, and then I'll kind of like stick at it. But I write the tune first, and then think what labels I'd like to send it to, and then there's a top tier of labels that you'll kind of. I send to like 2 or 3 of the dream labels that probably you'll never get, but every so often you do. Crosstown Rebels got back to me a year later. No, 6 months later, and it came out a year after I sent it to them, or a year and a half after I sent it to them. So it was like I was adamant until they had actually played I'd seen them play the record on SoundCloud, that I wasn't going to send it to anybody else. So, and I just hounded them, basically.
Nice.
But then again, it's like it's amazing product.
Sorry, what was that?
But it's amazing product. It's like the sound that you and the sound that you have always produced with other people it's just amazing. So of course you're gonna get signed. It's like, how could you not? And with the whole backstory of tracks in your history, it's like, dude,
that's a good help. That's a good help now. Like I feel for younger producers, because it's really difficult to get signed and for people to listen to your music, especially on like really big labels that get inundated. And the one lucky thing I have, and also I've got Gai. I've been working just exclusively with Gai. Both of our names are respected, so we have that leg up, which is is an unfair advantage for if you're coming from a younger producer.
I think your patience too is very cool to hear, because if you're sitting on a track for 6 months, a year, it speaks to the kind of the timeless sound that you're producing rather than chasing trends, in my opinion. Yeah. To have a track and be able to sit on it for 6 months or a year, and then have a label, eventually get back to you, and it makes sense for them in the moment right now. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, doing music because it's new and cool, I just think is, don't get me wrong, I'll go, I love that style. I don't know if you noticed, a lot of our stuff is very different. There's something that brings it all together, but they're all kind of very different sounding. I think the most progressive tune I've done in ages is the Reflections with Hans Bieger. It's just like, the rest have been a bit quirky, but I just think doing music just because it's trendy, you're not going to last, because you're always just going to be trying to do trendy music, and you're never going to get your own sound. And you need to kind of cultivate, you need to make music you're going to be happy with in a year, So it's just like, and if you're doing I don't want to put any genres down. But if you're doing something that's just current and everyone's doing it, there's nothing that makes you stand out. And if you keep doing stuff like that, you don't give yourself enough time to get your own sound and to kind of, just nurture your talent properly.
And how did you get into this synergy with Gai Barone? Like how did you guys like meet up and say, you know what?
I was working
start doing this.
I was working with Simon Berry who is Art of Trance, and he owns Platypus Records.
Totally.
Yeah. So Simon and I, we did what was the tune? Just Close Your Eyes. That was big on Bedrock, and we did that. And then we were listening to Patrice Bumel Essential Mix. And this tune came on. I was blown away. And Simon just instantly, he hadn't even heard it before. He went, "That's Gai Barone." I was like, "Who's Gai Barone?" He's like, "This amazing producer." And this is, you could just tell is him. And I was like, so I kind of, I Googled it to see, Shazam to try and find out. And it was. And I emailed Gai and just was like, God, that tune just blew me away. And Gai is like one of the gentlest souls that you'll ever meet. I mean, the guy is just, so zen. It's fucking crazy. And I think he just suggested that we do something, and it was so easy because, we have not once. I think we've been working together for like two or 3 years now, but we have not once raised a voice or had an argument or even a disagreement about anything. We've gone, I'm not into that, or I'm not into that. And instantly it's like, right, let's get rid of it. We can, we're both good enough to come up with something, a better idea. So, and Gai is just, as a pianist as well, just blows my mind. I'm sitting there kind of 2 fingers working things out. And he's like, fucking Chopin. I'm a bit better than that, but not compared to him. It's just, and having that in your arsenal is so valuable.
I'm sure having a mutual respect too for what both of you bring to the table makes it very easy for you guys to just respect each other's input. Because I can imagine like collaborations can be some of the trickiest things to do in production.
Yeah, they are. With like a lot of people, they just don't work. And you can just rub. I mean, but there's loads of people that does work. I've worked with Tim Nolan, who's an amazing producer, and him and I get on really well. Like it's just, but there's just something with Gai Barone that is with me and Gai Barone that is just special, and I haven't seen since I was working with Bruce. And to be honest, it's a lot more evolved than what Bruce and I was doing. Not putting down what we did in the past, but it's just I find, and Gai and I are just starting. Right, I don't think we've even released that many house tunes. I think we've done, other than Tokyo Fan Club, like 4 or 5 tunes. Do you know what I mean? It's just, but we speak to each other more than we speak to our wives. So like I've just got a lot of time for him. He's a special person.
Well, but then again, it's all like the experience and the professionalism, right? Like you guys have been producing music for a long time, so you know that. Okay, so if this doesn't work, it doesn't serve the track. So
absolutely. But he also came from a trance background. It was like a bit more trancey. Trance is the wrong word, but it was like he was going like more like we weren't on the same scenes. He was like I don't know, like I don't even know the labels, but they were more trancier labels. And I think he wanted to come over to this side, and and it just worked. It's just worked out, and like from the beginning. And he's been like totally, no one's like normally you'd get that trance producer is coming out. He's just not. He's just been accepted wholeheartedly because he's amazing. And I think he never made soulless trance. It was trance is the wrong word. I can't remember what he would call it. I don't know what he'd call it, but it was it's very emotive, very kind of, theatrical, beautiful music.
Oh, totally. But yeah, I think, one question we like to ask for all of our guests, and so the name of the podcast, the name of this whole channel, Super Progressive. One thing on my journey, and I'm like I was talking to you before the interview, it's only been a little over 2 years for me getting into this scene. And I think the chief lesson I've learned is that when progressive house, yes, it's a genre, but it's also a philosophy. The word progressive isn't just a genre. It's an approach, a philosophy to music of bringing in different styles, especially when you're mixing, not just the journey aspect, but bringing in different styles of music to fit together nicely and holistically. You have this whole musical soundscape. But talking to you, someone who has created, music in a band setting, as a producer, you're a DJ, like all of these different things. I'm interested to hear when you hear the word progressive, what that means to you.
I mean, it's quite a heavy question, because progressive has just been my life since I was, early 20s until, I'm not going to say my age now because it's embarrassing. It's just making me feel ill just thinking about it, just the amount of time. But progressive is just, it's like when progressive went through, it was like almost a dirty word. And it's just coming out of that at the moment as well. Progressive for me is just, I don't know, it's just a really heavy question to ask. I think it's just the sound of what I like and me really. It's just an evolution of good music. It's a really you've stumped me on that. It's a really.
I didn't mean to stump you. It's just like
I'm sounding like an idiot to myself while I'm talking, but it's the word progressive means a lot to me, but I don't know how to explain it in music terms. It's it's vast.
Well, that's kind of the experience that I have too. My friends, they're like, so what is what's progressive? And I'm like, it's just like
super progressive. I can't explain the progressive. I'm not going to be able to explain what's super progressive.
No, but you said it well at the beginning. It's like progressive is your life. Everything is progressive.
And it's the evolution of just musical taste and the evolution of music itself.
Evolution of life. Everything is progressive.
I mean, it's just, it is, I've said that word every day since my early 20s. So it's, in some way or other, it's just, it's a fantastic thing.
Yeah, I know, amazing. Ruben, do you have any final questions?
Well, so we talked about the future. We talked about what the plans are. Well, sort of talked about, because there are things that are still discrete because it's all the whole future thing. But is there any project or idea or thing that you would like to attack in the future, like as a producer or as a DJ or anything related?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think I want to get into doing more kind of, I would love to do movies ultimately. And there's been a lot of talk about this happening as well. Like I said, there's talks with Apple TV and Netflix earlier on. So that is something that I wholeheartedly, the older I get, the kind of, less I want to be DJing as much as I do. I could see the movies or these kind of epic TV series being something I would, I definitely am very excited to kind of get my teeth into. I've done small bits before, but we're having like conversations where it could be like huge things. So that's really exciting, and it fits my age as well.
Well, for an artist who has seemed to have done it all, I'm stoked for you to find new frontiers, new ways to push yourselves, and new ways to evolve as an artist. So I'm just stoked for you, bro.
Thank you so much, buddy. This has been a real pleasure. You guys,
thanks.
I was such a fan of his videos of him kind of doing the response to, you know, the like
reactions,
old tunes, the reaction videos, and when I saw them, it just like absolutely made me smile because it was like everything's so serious, and all of a sudden you've got this, you know, cool kid like freaking out to kind of engage in the past. It was just a real breath of fresh air. So I was a massive fan. So thank you for having me on, and really lovely to meet you, Ruben.
Oh, thank you, man. It's an honor for us to have you here. Trust me. Thank you very much for your time and for your input and just all the music, man. It's been part of the soundtrack of my life. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah. And everyone listening, all the links, all the music we talked about, all the links that are available, we'll put those in the description of this video. So hopefully you'll be able to have a nice refresher of all we've talked about today. But Luke, thank you.
And
yeah, go ahead.
And remember, hey, comment, share, like it. It helps us. It just helps us to bring all this everywhere and everybody to get this culture. And Will, you know how it is, man. Stay true. Stay progressive, man.
Always, bro. Thank you, Luke. Thank you, everyone listening, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Have a great day, man.
Bye.